What is up, crypto gang? Welcome back to another episode. If you guys are brand new to Hack Crypto, this is where we hack our crypto education. And on every single episode, we do a giveaway at the beginning of every show. So today's winner is Dobie G. Thanks so much for commenting on the previous video with your wallet address, Dobie G. I just sent you some crypto. On this episode, I sit down with the legendary Hashoshi. Hashoshi's a well-known YouTuber. He's a developer and he does some amazing breakdowns on his channel. So I'm going to be linking to his channel in the description below. If you guys are brand new here, I've brought Hashoshi on the show multiple times and we wanted to do a collab video again to talk about NFTs, collectibles, and ultimately conspiracy theories. And we go a little off track towards the end there with some good gems about privacy and things like that towards the end. So without further ado, let's dive into the interview with my man Hashoshi. What's up, guys? I am with Forrest from Hashoshi and I am Steve McGarry from Hack Crypto.
How's it going, guys? Hashoshi here.
And we just wanted to sit down and talk a little bit more about NFTs and collectibles just because they are a hot topic right now.
Yeah, hot indeed. And one of my favorite things to build from.
Yeah. So maybe I'll kick off the first question
Sure.
and then we can just bounce back and forth. So from we briefly offline, we're talking about engine and stuff like that. What are some of, from a tech perspective, that you have your background in and development, things like that? What are you most excited about with NFTs and development?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I'm a little biased because I've built most of my projects with Ethereum or Ethereum offshoot technologies, but I think Ethereum's standard for NFTs really kicked it off. I mean, the first real example of what an NFT would probably be CryptoKitties. And obviously there's a lot of concern and skepticism because it kind of broke the network in a sense because it was very expensive in gas. But some of the optimizations that have happened in standardizing these contracts to make NFTs possible at much larger scales, awesome. So I think Ethereum is still a leader in that space and hopefully will continue to be. You mentioned Engine, which has been, for people who care a lot about price, Engine's been really doing well market-wise lately. And I think that's because they're about to launch their developer hub, if you will. People are calling it a mainnet, but it's not actually a new blockchain. It's just their developer hub where basically anyone's going to be able to go in and create their own NFTs, mint these non-fungible tokens and do what they want with them. So there's a lot of stuff happening for Engine. I'm pretty stoked about that because to this day, they're probably one of the easiest places to go focused on NFTs.
Nice.
Yeah,
So really easy. Will it be like drag and drop, or what's the plan for on their end?
I think and I'm not positive how this is going to play out, but I don't think it'll be quite as easy as drag and drop. I think it might require a little bit of acumen, at least understanding how to set things up. But from my understanding, it's going to be an easy to use interface where you can go in and mint tokens.
Nice.
Which should be awesome. I'm stoked to see that. Hopefully it'll be here soon.
Yeah. And the ease of use component to all of this, whether it's the end user, like with CryptoKitties, they pioneered masking, this with this beautiful, cute little kitten, so that you had a simple interface. So now doing that on the development side really greases the wheels, I feel like, for people to get involved from a development perspective and just minting these things. It's going to be exciting.
Yeah. So, I mean, from your perspective, I mean, you have a business that's very much oriented towards or has their hands in NFTs. So could you explain where you guys are at with Grow Your Base and what's happening for you in the future, if you can share?
Yeah. I'll share what I can.
Cool.
So Grow Your Base has pretty much come from its inception 2 years ago, and we built it over the course of 2 years based on user feedback. So as an entrepreneur over the past 5 years, I've learned that your customers and users are always going to kind of guide where things go. Like you'll create a tool and then they'll use it upside down all over the place, and they'll use it in a way that they see useful. And often when you deploy something, it's going to be used in a way that you didn't really think about. So when we released our version 1.0. I remember you actually tested it for us. I remember
Yeah,
sending it to you, and thanks for doing that.
sure.
and
Anytime.
and beating up that version 1.0, super key, and people telling us like, hey, we're really interested in tokenization, we're interested in assets, we're interested in games. So
Mhm.
we narrowed it down. Like we started with this wide net of saying, what are people going to be interested in learning about? What are they interested on from an educational perspective?
Mhm.
And we quickly picked up on gaming and tokenized assets, digital assets in general. So they were going through basic assignments like entering in their email, sharing on social media, signing up for a service, and we started seeing traction from the user side. So
Mhm.
now we passed 25,000 active users this past month,
Awesome.
and it's pretty evenly distributed all over the world, but primarily in the US right now. We're about 60% in the US from a user base perspective. And everyone goes through and completes basic assignments, and they get rewarded in NFTs and tokenized assets for completing these tiny little tasks and learning about it, because we saw education is a huge gap. Like there's
Yeah.
just a massive hole in this space to simplify it down and everything. So we passed the 25,000 user mark, and we've partnered with a little over 25 of the top developers in the NFT and tokenized asset space.
Mhm.
And from their perspective, they get new users. They give the NFTs to earners that have earned it. We call our users earners. And it's kind of a mutually beneficial platform where the developers get distribution, they get new people that understand what they're actually doing onboarded,
Mhm.
and earners get to learn about new assets. So we've done a little over 400,000 transactions on the platform itself.
It's pretty good. Yeah.
And a transaction is just like a user completing a task.
Got
So
it.
yeah, we're taking it to the next level this week when I'm in NFT NYC. Going to be doing a pretty big announcement that I'm excited about. Kind of leaked it to Forrest before this, of course, but
I don't know anything.
I don't know anything. But
Cool. Yeah. No, I'm stoked on that.
yeah, it's going to be. We really want to be front runners in the space. We want to help people learn about these different types of assets. And the previous company I did was in peer-to-peer lending, which was
Mhm.
bypassing banks, allowing peers to lend to students to get loans, to learn programming and just education through boot
Yeah.
camps. And education's a passion mixed with finance. So take from that what you will. That's
Nice.
what's coming.
Yeah. Now that you've got like the super tease going on for everybody, you guys will have to stay tuned for post event news regarding what's going on at Grow Your Base. But I think as a use case, NFTs as a reward for already incentivized activities like learning more about something. I mean, you see that a lot with the industry now. Surveys, they'll give you gift cards or experiences, tickets to stuff to just to give your feedback. I mean, do you see NFTs as a method by which companies with their brands, for example, could incentivize people to give feedback on product? I mean, I think that could be a cool use case.
Yeah. Yeah. I see there's a lot of really interesting things moving in the space
Hmm.
right now. Like we're working with a developer who's building Mag NFT. So Mag NFT is like a magazine for crypto art, and an issue
Got it.
comes out bi-weekly, I think. And the way that it works is you buy one of these NFTs, and that NFT is like a membership subscription to this magazine. And if you have the NFT, you can purchase exclusive art in their portfolio. And that
That's
type
rad.
of creativity of, allowing people to get into this club and then purchase exclusive things within that club through an NFT as like the key, I see that being very, very compelling to like SaaS businesses in the future, and all different ways of really, really making sure that people are who they say they are. They're coming
Yes.
in and verifying ownership, that they've purchased. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about if I purchased membership or not. And
Yeah, for
it's
sure.
it's really interesting creativity going on with things like that.
Definitely. I mean, and following on that, if you have that sort of membership pass that allows you to buy this exclusive art, as that art changes hands, there's a way that you can say, has this art only been in the hands of people who have, privilege to buy it? Has this gone to secondary markets and then back again? Provenance starts to play a factor as well, which is really cool.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, NFTs are powerful. I think I was reading in the news that there are more and more, sports teams that are starting to explore tokenization, including NFTs, and I'm all for it. This will probably be in my news segment for Fridays, but I think UEFA, the organizer for the Champions League, big soccer tournament, probably the biggest besides the World Cup, is going to be selling some tickets that are based off of tokens, and those
Nice.
will be, I guess it'll be a pilot to let in, a bunch of people using digital token based tickets, which should be pretty fantastic test. Hopefully it goes well and we can get the first fully digital sporting event ticket wise. That would be really
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. And like, for example, I was just mentioning before the stream, like I did a stream with Ken Bozak, and we talked about some cool use cases and what he's doing. I don't even know if it's public or not, but he's
Mm-hmm.
uh, basically created an NFT for himself, and that's his business card. So he goes around, and when he meets people, he sends
Mm-hmm.
them an NFT that's him, and he
So
knows he's connected then with that person through that address. So in the future, if he wanted to partner with a developer or a company that said, "Hey, we want to do an airdrop of these NFTs to really valuable people," Ken could say, "All right, well, I'm connected to all these people, and I can help you guys because I've met them. We
yeah,
share a transaction in the past." And it's a really great way of almost like solidifying that you've met people. It's like a LinkedIn, but actually, confirming
provable.
that you
Yeah.
physically met someone and scanned their address.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. I mean, and ideas like that, I think, are going to continue to you know, get used more, because it's not like the barrier to entry to create your own NFT is starting to get so small. It's like almost, it seemed insurmountable when CryptoKitties came into the space, because for what it was then, it was a very complicated implementation of how they did it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think the protocol is quite ready for it either. And so as it's developed, though, it's become much easier to build your own. And even if you don't have developer skills per se, you can still technically do it, because there are so many templates out there. So
Yeah. And even on OpenSea, the biggest
mhm,
decentralized exchange for these things, they're doing like a drag and drop storefront. So
mhm,
like we could publish this episode, and then you and I could both go on to OpenSea, create an NFT, and people would be able to go to the link or something in the description and purchase $1 NFT for each of us or something like that. Like
mhm.
there's really, really great things happen. Like when you said with Engine creating a lower barrier to deploy these things, I think it's super exciting to see that lower um, that lower barrier for people.
Totally. And I mean, this kind of technology can permeate. If you talk about credentialing for people, there's a lot of licensing, both for rights to use software, like that type of license, but also licensing like driver's licenses and all sorts of things that right now are physical, and counterfeiting is huge right now.
Mm-hmm.
But you can take out a lot of the ability to counterfeit these types of things by making them, truly digital tokenized assets, if you will, that are, you can prove provenance from a legitimate government agency within seconds.
Yeah.
And so, for people that are very much in this space, that don't believe that government's going to have anything to do with anything in the future because of this technology, I think that that's not necessarily true. But there are a lot of benefits that could be given to people, more control over your, pieces of identification by using tokens, and including NFTs.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know if you've done your taxes yet this year, but
Mhm.
literally on the tax return at like H&R Block and I think TurboTax and all those, there's just a yes or no binary question that says, have you bought, sold, or exchanged in any way virtual currencies.
Hmm.
So they're definitely trying to collect data, and I don't think that it would negatively affect you or anything like that.
Hmm.
But they're just trying to collect information about, okay, is this a viable, asset that people are actually using? And my
Yeah.
guess is that they're going to get quite surprised by the amount of people that have.
Yeah, for sure. And I also think that there were so many periods of time where people, like NFTs, for example, it's not as easy as going and buying it and then later selling it and then figuring it out. Like if you sell it, then okay, I sold it for X and I bought it for Y. So there's an easy way for me to calculate what my gain or loss is on this asset.
Mm-hmm.
But these NFTs are more challenging in that regard, because if you don't sell it and you're just sitting on it, like you can remember, okay, maybe I know what I paid for it, but if I didn't pay for it, I got this for free and then I could sell it later. How is this treated tax wise? And like, it gets very confusing for people and very stressful. So we're not even to the point where we have clarity on regular tokens, let alone some of these more niche style, NFTs and stuff like that. It's very, very tricky.
Yeah, yeah. And usually there's an old saying that's like, the first ones through the door get the most bullets.
Hmm.
And I think, like Charlie Shrem and those guys back in 2012, 2013, when I first started learning about the space,
Hmm.
it was apparent that when, he was doing things with, what was it, Bid Instant, like that
Hmm.
was front lines, very, very iffy type, behavior going on that was kind of scary to see
Hmm.
him go to prison for it. And I think that in the near future, it'll definitely be more mainstream with things like NFTs, because with people like William Shatner getting involved
Hmm.
and his massive audience with Star Trek of
Yeah.
verifying ownership of actual collectibles that are Star Trek. I mean, that once that starts to get into the nerdy, or the nerdier community, I guess we're all nerds here in
Yeah.
crypto, but
Yeah.
the the actual mainstream nerd community, I think that is going to crack open a really interesting conversation with a lot of these newcomers in this next run up. But I did want to ask, what, in terms of what you're seeing from, people on your channel, because your channel's been exploding with growth,
Appreciate it,
and
man.
bravo on that. I love
Thanks.
the new series and everything you're doing. But what are you seeing? And I like to ask a lot of well-known YouTubers, what are you seeing in terms of questions? Because I try to, do my
Hmm.
best to say, don't understand it before you get involved, learn as you go, figure things out.
Yeah.
What are you seeing in terms of questions to your videos and things?
I think a lot of the questions that I'm getting are, can you explain to me what this project is doing and how it's different from X, right? Like what, if I talk about, Cardano, right? Someone will say, can you explain to me like what they're doing that's different from Ethereum? Like, and do you, and a lot of questions too about, I heard this YouTuber say this about this project. What do you think about it? You know,
Oh,
for example, and I think it's good. That's good to me to see people saying, hey, I've gotten information from one source, now I'm here and I'm trying to figure out, that this is people going through the cycle of doing more research than just one person's opinion. So it's nice. But I get
that's
a lot of
cool.
that, criticisms that have been laid towards, Ethereum or Cardano or Icon or whomever else for, taking a long time developing stuff or not marketing or whatever. I get a lot of questions about my thoughts there. So
Yeah. Because I mean, each one of your videos is getting hundreds of people inquiring. And I think that it's so important for people like us that are making content on
mhm.
YouTube to just identify trends. So I'm always curious, when you have that much of a reach with commenters and things like that. It's such
Yeah.
um, a cool, and I love seeing the comment that's like, "Hey, I just checked out this service. I'm new to crypto. I've never heard about this stuff before, but now I'm
Yeah.
hooked." That's that's what makes it all.
That's
And
so cool. Yeah.
for every, you know 100 trolls, if there's one of those comments, it makes
Yeah.
all the others worth it.
I agree, man. I agree. And two, it's tough because when you do these types of videos, I at least personally find it really, I'm always wanting to explain, like, I am speaking about this stuff because I care about the technology. And if all the prices just didn't exist, like if these things weren't worth anything, I'd still think that this was cool. Right. And if I make a video about, you know, Chainlink, I'm not saying in bold letters, go and buy Link. I'm saying Chainlink is cool. What do you think? If you like it, then do what you want, you know?
Yeah.
And so it's a fine line because people, I think, want to go and make buying decisions based off of a couple videos, but it takes a lot more time to make that decision for yourself. And
Yeah.
so each of our individual channels might help you get like 10% of your research done on that, but it takes time to figure it all out.
Yeah. Yeah. And I always try to emphasize the fact that you don't need to be an expert,
Mm-hmm.
and this doesn't require a ton of technical knowledge. You just have to be able to read, just have to be comfortable
Yeah.
with learning, and you're going to be okay. Don't have to open your wallet. You don't have to buy anything. You can
Yeah.
just go through the motion of just learning all this stuff and getting comfortable with it. And there's a saying that we use on the Grow Your Base team about education versus speculation. And
Mm-hmm.
if someone buys something without understanding it, they're speculating. Someone
Yes.
who is educated on it and understands it, they're investing.
I
And
agree. Totally.
there's a big, big difference there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and that's to say we're not alone in this space in that regard because people still do that with stock. They go,
Mhm.
they subscribe to a couple of newsletters and then they get the email that's in all caps, buy this, buy this stock now. And then they don't even know what company it is, but they buy it because they want to make money. And it's totally a human reaction.
Yeah.
But you know, going to a celebrity example, Shaq has talked about how he invests based off of Jeff Bezos's whole concept of like, will it change people's lives? Even if you go that route, like that's better than just buying something without knowing what it is.
Yeah. Shaq's a great example because he
Yeah.
was in on Ring, I think the doorbell, and then Bezos bought that, right? So
Yeah.
I guess that makes sense. He's a fascinating guy. He owns like
Yeah.
55 guys restaurants. He's a total baller. Total
Totally.
baller.
And he's a great example of, an athlete who made a significant amount of money during his career and invested it rather than spent it. And
Hmm.
now it's paying off for him big time.
Yeah.
And, there are other athletes now that are doing interesting stuff like Spencer Dinwiddie doing his, trying to tokenize his contract and sell his contract. Like these things are going to be looked back on as like, oh, wow, like this is now, 10 years from now, that could be just a normal thing people do all the time. And he was one of the first to propose it. So
Yeah. That's
hats
a
off.
that's a great segue into like tokenized assets. I
Hmm.
think there's a really interesting disagreement that happens in the space because we work with Realty, the
Hmm.
company that's tokenizing real estate on Ethereum,
Yeah.
and there's like a disagreement, and I think some of the Bitcoin maximalists and things like that talk about it, like Tone Bays
Hmm.
and those guys, where they say that it's not actually backed. So I'm interested. I mean, obviously, we don't have all the answers
Yeah.
in terms of this stuff, but what are you excited about in terms of assets that are being tokenized? Like, what gets you excited in the morning?
Yeah. I think there are so many. The first one, I think, could also harken back to NFTs, but tokenization within games, I think, is going to be huge. And that's like the first, because there's no, the challenge is breaching that physical to digital world wall where how do you prove that an asset in the real world hasn't moved or been destroyed or disposed of and then the token, its location or ownership didn't move, right? Like if those things get out of sync, then it's hard to track, and making sure that doesn't happen is challenging. But within the digital world where everything's already digital, I think that's the first frontier where this is really potentially massively adopted. So down to people saying, well, if a game developer is going to set the supply in an open world game for something, and then, how like the pricing is fixed, right? Like they get to decide what pricing is and what the aftermarket rates are. In my opinion, it's going to move more the direction of user created items, where these game developers give users the ability to create their own in-game items using their skills and to sell those off. They set the supply. They can sort of set abilities within certain bounds for that item, or if it's just cosmetic, the design. And then you have this sort of secondary market where the game developer is going to take a cut of any transaction to make their money back. And everyone else gets a whole plethora of new content in game to keep these games fresh. Because I don't know if you're a gamer, but over time, even online games get repetitive and boring because you're using and doing the same things over and over again. So you might have games now that have a shelf life of 4 or 5 years instead of 1 or 2, because these developers don't have to keep building and creating new stuff constantly. It can be done via community, and you have this whole, exchange of goods that happens there. So that's a big one that I'm looking at.
Yeah, gaming, 100% agree with that. That is all the people that I've talked to that are in the gaming development space, like your Lucid site that is literally like 30 or 40 developers out of LA that are building multiple blockchain games. I mean, there's big teams working on it. And one of the really interesting ones, similar to what you're talking about, was the play to own concept, where if there's a fixed supply within a game of collectibles, you could go through, and if you're playing, let's say, I don't know, 10 hours a day as a kid, we'll caveat that with as a kid. Adults out there don't play 10 hours a day, but
ouch.
they could collect these assets and make a percentage of the revenue that the game makes overall. And I think when you get that detailed and granular down into what people are able to accomplish within a game, that translates into real world, we could call it income. I think that you are kind of playing around the realm of securities and things like that, but it is a super innovative thought that a teenager in South Africa or South America or Spain or something, they could all be sharing in this one game and earning income by owning parts of this game. So super interesting creativity going on the gaming front, and there's hundreds of millions of people that play these types of games all over the world.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I mean, gaming is one of those tricky things because now they've been moving. It's a moving target because there's so many different ways that you can buy games. You can buy the game outright and then it's yours for life. You can buy, physical or digital. You can do subscription where you just get a plethora of games, unlimited for as long as you have your subscription. But there might even be ways that staking could be used, staking mechanisms to say, as long as you're staking X amount of our tokens. I'm going to use Origin as an example because I used to have an Origin gaming subscription. As long as you're staking a certain number of Origin tokens, you have access to our library of games. The more you stake, the more games you have access to in tiers. And kind of go with that model. As soon as you unstake, you lose access to your titles, whatever. There's so many different ways you can do this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And now I tend to bring this up more than I should because, but the concept of Decentraland and Crypto Voxels, my two favorite virtual world games, I think that, I'll touch on the subject. We can skip over it, but the simulation, living in a simulation and seeing games like this happen where people are having meetups within Crypto Voxels, within Decentraland. They're having art shows. They're having nightclubs. They're all meeting up in this virtual world using VR headsets, using web VR browsers, things like that on their computers. It's just sort of a it's sort of a step in the the whole concept of someone creating a virtual world that is so realistic that you're hanging out with your friends doing things every day in this
Yeah.
world. And when you mentioned like staking and things like that, I was thinking of like some of these concepts of making income. If you lived in this virtual world 24/7, how
Yeah.
would you make your income? Selling tickets to your little like fair within the digital world, or starting a business like selling NFTs within this world that gave you access to other businesses or places.
Yeah.
It's just such a trippy meta concept to be thinking about. And I love that people are pushing that boundary,
Totally. Yeah.
because it's just like, yeah, I always bring that up though, just because it really trips me out.
Yeah. No, there's so many, funny, like, trippy rabbit holes you can go down with these,
Yeah.
but yeah, then that's awesome. And I think that I completely agree that the world of gaming and also like the second lifestyle games are gonna stop being games and more so like a lifestyle thing that people do all the time. It's already starting to happen that way. I mean, I like to go out places, but some people don't. They just want to jump online, hang with their friends, and that's like satiating and fun for them. So like that's I'm sure where we're going eventually.
Yeah. Yeah. And you throw an avatar in the mix where you can look however you want, talk
Yeah.
however you want. I mean, you're you're pushing the boundaries of ever leaving your house. You got Instacart bringing your groceries.
Truly.
Yeah, it's like it's a crazy time to be watching all of it kind of take hold. And I think it's Adam Draper,
Hmm.
Tim Draper's son, who runs Boost VC.
Hmm.
I used to live right down the street from Boost VC, but they always made the claim that if the world is like virtual reality in the future, do you
Hmm.
really think we're going to be using cash?
Yeah.
and,
Honestly.
and you wouldn't be able to use cash in a completely digital reality, virtual world.
Yeah,
Uh,
you'll just scan it in as a PDF.
yeah, yeah, quick scan.
Yeah.
It's just, and I love that point where it's like, yeah, everything is clearly going this way, and future generations are going to laugh that we used little germy pieces of paper to
Yeah.
give to each other.
I'm totally with you. And it's one of those things where the incentives that there are for people and governments and businesses and all that, those can be aligned on this new technology, where unilateral decisions and like one-sided agreements are very often part of our lives today. I think that blockchain cryptocurrency stuff, as well as other technologies that are more cognitive in focus like machine learning stuff, can be used to sort of, I hate to use the cliche term, but level the playing field for people in general, not just within one country but globally. And we're at the very beginning of that. The dawn of the internet, I think there were a lot of people who didn't really realize, because they weren't intimately involved or they weren't interested or they thought it was stupid or whatever, how prevalent it was going to be and how unavoidable it was going to be in the future. And I think we're right there in that same place where all these technologies, you look at them, you're like, well, how does this solve any of my problems? Like, it's not scalable. It doesn't do this. The UX isn't right. It'll get there. And then when it does, it's going to be this crazy evolution that no one's going to be able to avoid, and not in a bad way either.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
And not to get down the conspiracy rabbit hole too much, but there was a lot of information around what happened in the internet um,
mhm,
bubble, where people were buying all these companies, and it was retail people buying all of these stocks like AOL,
mhm,
um, you know, Netscape, all these amazing companies they were getting access to,
mhm,
and then the institutions said, "Don't buy this. This is terrible. Do not buy eBay. Do not buy Amazon. Do not buy any of these companies."
mhm.
And what you saw happen in that time frame was people selling because they were being told that it was
Then it's bad.
scammy. And in that time frame, the institutions, I think it was something like either 4x or 5x the amount of holdings they had in all those companies.
Mm-hmm.
So in a I won't say like that they stole those assets from people, but it was a very controversial time where they said,
Yeah.
don't do this. And then
Mm-hmm.
they did it.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like trails of manipulation, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And
And I'm certain that that happens. I mean, that still happens today, but it happens in crypto also.
yeah, yeah. And that was kind of the, where I was moving towards is when you have JP Morgan and these big institutions that are,
Mm-hmm.
bashing a technology and, um, saying, don't get this, this is super scammy. But then in the
Mm-hmm.
background, people have traced back the fact that they are buying it. Um,
Yeah.
it's, it's a scary thing. So do as they, what's the phrase? It's like, don't, don't do as they say, do as they do, or something like that, where
Yes.
it's like follow what they do.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, imitate, don't listen to what they're
Yeah.
saying. Yeah. No. And the JP Morgan one is one that I think is one of the most interesting examples, because not only are they, or have they, and I'm not going to say the entirety of the company, it's mostly been like just individuals that are in leadership positions at this company have, been saying all of this stuff that's very negative towards not just Bitcoin, but crypto assets as a whole, blockchain as a whole. And then they have developed internally what I argue to be one of the best Ethereum based offshoot projects, like open source projects in Quorum, that exists, so there's investment that's happening there beyond just buying crypto assets. So it's clear that they don't, as an organization, think that way. Otherwise they wouldn't have built and maintained this code base. Granted, now I think it looks like they're trying to divest from it by selling off at least the code, if not the team, over to Consensus. So we shall see what happens. But I mean, I've used Quorum to build several projects, and it's been pretty awesome to
Yeah.
use, to be honest. So, yeah, it's always interesting to see that. I think a lot of companies that posture like we are anti this whole space and anti innovative tech in general, like, oh, AI is overhyped, or, whatever, are oftentimes making investment in that same technology behind the scenes. So you just have to take everything with a grain of salt.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess, one more final controversial
Go for it.
question. I I don't know how I stand on it or where I sit with
Hmm.
it, but in the realm of privacy, a lot of people very much are super intense about privacy
Hmm.
and things like that. And I heard a new train of thought around privacy recently that I was like, whoa, I hadn't really heard of it before. But the
Hmm.
concept that, um, actually in the future, offloading your information, the more information technology has, the more powerful you are. And this controversial concept of basically saying if you're into privacy, you're a technophobe, is kind of a very strange thing that I haven't quite wrapped my mind around yet of where I stand.
Hmm.
You want zero privacy and superpower with technology just completely able to run all the aspects of your life? Or do you hold on to privacy and fight the technology that's coming?
Yeah, I mean, that's a nuanced one for sure, because there are multiple levels to it. And this is totally off the cuff. We didn't discuss this before, so I've had approximately 12 seconds to think about this. So forgive any hot takes. I would say the first thing that I think about is I'm actually totally okay with technology to an extent having my information, but it depends on A, the format, and B, the ownership of that tech, right? Because
Mhm.
now the way that it is someone else owns that stuff, right? This is inclusive of governments, this is inclusive of companies, and this is inclusive of friends who I might send my information to, right? If I don't trust the other person that has the admin rights to that system or service, then I don't want my information there, because I can't trust that the standards are going to be upheld. Encryption at rest and encryption over connection, in transit. Is my personal information stored with other stuff, like other metadata, like just basic best practices that I need to know, right? Will my information be sold to someone else without my knowledge or consent? All these things are things you don't have control over today, which is why in reaction, people take privacy super seriously and are starting to like overcompensate for that by saying, I'm going to delete all my social media. I'm not going to have, I'm not going to use any email accounts that I don't, I'm going to use something like Proton Mail, to an extent that might help you. But I think the reason though is because people don't feel like they have control, and they don't know what happens after their data leaves their hands. So if we move to a place where we could use, we're using services that are not centrally controlled, that are more so, based on a consortia or based off of, technology doesn't have an owner, right? Or someone with an admin key, I might be more comfortable letting that piece of technology have information that it can use to better serve me, right? As long as the tech, let's make sure it's open source, right? I can go and verify there aren't any backdoors. There's no foolish stuff going on. I don't know. That's an interesting question.
Yeah, it's like a total curveball. It's a curveball question, because it's
no.
I mean, if for example, in the future, let's say 20 years from now, there's a group of people that do have zero privacy, 0% privacy, or let's say 5% privacy. They're able to control their own thoughts, obviously, but everything else is out in the open. It's open source, let's say, verifiable, things like that. Them being effectively cyborgs and superhuman, then there's another group of people that have resisted, that aren't at that, like, let's say, I don't know, the bandwidth level, maybe, as the people that are cyborgs. So it's,
I would be so much more comfortable with that if it weren't so fragmented as like it is today, right? Today, you have so much stuff. Like for example, and I have a video coming out tomorrow about personal cybersecurity, like what to do, what is important to do for yourself to protect yourself. But most people, and this was inclusive of me, like I'm not saying I'm above this, don't even know how many accounts they have that they've created, right? So often we'll go online and be like, well, I want to figure out, I want to have a new bank, right? But they go and they create 5 different accounts on different banks, and then they just keep the one that they like and then just leave the other ones, right? Now you have now 5 opportunities for a hacker to get your most sensitive information on earth, just because you made that one decision, right? And then if you forget, there's no way you can even go back and clean it up. Like you can't, if you lose access to the email, good luck going on customer service and saying, hey, I think I made an account there. Here's my name. Can you please go and delete it? They'll be like, sure, hang up, and then they won't delete it, So, fragmentation is a tricky one, because Social Security, that's owned by someone else. That's owned by one agency, and then that's collected by other people to identify you. Then they sometimes use your license info, your passport info. There's like no unification of your data to say, if we protect this, you protect yourself. It's everywhere. Like it's all over the place. So it's a really challenging problem to solve, online security like that is.
Yeah. And before everybody watching and listening thinks that I'm like a no privacy advocate, I propose that virtual worlds and avatars within those worlds is a fantastic way of reaching that. Like, if you're putting information in that virtual world, you could be your superhuman self as an avatar in this virtual world. You could give it whatever information that you choose. And that barrier then allows you to be this superhuman cyborg type thing in this virtual world. And you still get to keep everything offline that you choose to keep offline. So that was my kind of full circle attempt.
Full circle moment, yeah.
as not being like an anarchist person talking about, just give in to all the technology. Just
Yeah, but I mean, look, the average, I would say every person drawing breath right now over the age of 12, actually over the age of 8, let's just say that. Everyone over the age of 8 that's drawing breath right now has already given up every ounce of privacy that they could have otherwise earned, because the culture today is to give up all of your personal information and to put your brand, it also includes your personal info. Because like all the incentives are backwards right now, where advertisers feel like they need to collect as much information down to your, your birthday, your, you know whatever it is, like as much information as they can to better market to you, when in reality they could market to you plenty well without it, but there's demand for it and they know they can sell it for money. So if people stop buying all that stuff, or people stopped giving it, then those incentives would change and they'd have to change directions. But until then, data collection is just going to continue, and you have to just be careful about what you put out there to people that you don't know or trust. Simple as that.
Yeah. And any quick last tips for cybersecurity, like that any beginner can use
um I
that
would.
doesn't, that doesn't ruin your video that you're releasing?
Good point. I'll just give the whole video up here. No, the first thing would be, I would say the average person uses Gmail and has at least one Gmail account most of the time, right? Because it's easy. It was the first and one of the only email clients that did encrypt your traffic by default. Whatever. I actually have no issue with Gmail. I still use it. But the number one thing you need to do is make sure that you don't have this, I call it the chain of death. You have your first Gmail account you made when you were 12, which you decided you don't like the username, so you made another one. But you made the new email that you just made, and all your banking stuff is connected to the backup email. To recover that email is your old one, right? That you don't check and you don't use. So now all a hacker really has to do is, if they know they need to get into that email because they scraped your new email address from a bank hack, they just need to find your other one and get into that one that's probably unsecured. And now they can recover your new email, get into it, lock you out, and then get into all your accounts, right? So get rid of all the backup email stuff and your phone number, backup phone number, ditch it, and just use something like Google Authenticator. If you really want to do a good job, go for like a YubiKey. They have like an authenticator app that uses hardware. Do that. And that's like the best easy thing you can do to protect yourself, because your email is almost always the ticket to a bunch of other stuff.
Got
And
it.
that sets off a chain reaction. Once they get your email, and if you can't get it back, they've already probably recovered passwords to dozens of other accounts that now they can use to get into other ones. And it's hard to get rid of.
Yeah. Yeah. I got SIM swapped like three times in 2017 and 2018.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't as like, it was a chain reaction,
Mm-hmm.
but it was so fast that, overnight I could just see scrolling notifications that my passwords were being reset
Mm-hmm.
on everything that had ever been accessed through an old email account.
Mm-hmm.
And email is like the backbone of a lot of things that you do online, like
Yeah.
accounts pretty much everywhere.
It's a cornerstone of authentication. And I guarantee you that if you've had the same email address since 2012, any email address you've created between 2012 and now has been in a breach of some kind over the last 8 to 10 years,
Yeah.
because so many services that tons of people use, like Sony PlayStation Network got hacked, and Capital One and all these others. Your email is no longer like private. People know your email, its associated password, and probably your birthday and your name. Once they've got that, they know where to look. And so there's no way to actually stop a SIM swap from happening, because a lot of these people have people inside the organizations at the major carriers, but you can stop those SIM swap attacks from being deadly. And that's, hypothetical. It's not actually deadly per se, but you can make them far less powerful if you just lock down your email, because they might even get your password, but without the backup codes or without your hardware key, they can't actually do anything with it. So once they take your phone over, if they can't use your phone number to get into any accounts, then they've already hit a wall.
Good tip. Good tip.
Now that we've gone like full conspiracy, everyone's going to be like panicking, like trying to fix their Gmail account now.
Yeah.
So
thinking about living in a virtual world, trying to get SIM swapped, doing cybersecurity.
This was just a test of your blood pressure medicine, this whole video.
That's right. That's right. Cool, man. Cool. Well, this was a lot of fun. We covered a ton of topics here, and we need to do this again soon.
We will, man. We should get a cadence going where people know where they're going to get a collab every, X number of weeks or something like that.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Cool. Yeah, we should also do a podcast episode sometime.
Yeah. Is that rumor to be that you're rolling out a podcast?
I actually had, I'd started up a podcast, and then I realized quickly that I needed to line up guests ahead of time, because I can't fathom listening to myself talk for an hour by myself. So I need to riff and talk to other people. So I'm starting to build up a list of people, and then that will be launching fairly shortly. So
sweet.
You heard it here first.
You heard it here first, folks. Well, I'd love to be added to that list. I would love to be on the list. We could talk about all sorts of conspiracy theories.
Sounds good to me. This is a no holds bar, free topic sort of podcast with innovative tech as the holding pattern, I would say.
Nice.
Cool. But yeah, thanks again, man. Always a good time talking to you, and let's definitely do it again soon.
Let's do it, man.
Right on. Cheers, everybody.
That is it for my interview with Hashoshi. As I said before, the link to his channel will be in the description below. If you guys are brand new here and you like this video, slap a like. It really helps the channel, helps out the algorithm, helps YouTube give me a pat on the back and promote the video. And also subscribe to the channel for more of this awesome content coming this year. I got some exciting videos rolling out in the next couple of weeks here, so definitely stick around, and I will see you guys on the next video.